Right. Okay, it's 5:01. So we have representatives here from Rockport, Camden, Lincolnville, Owl's Head, Rockland, Searsmont, and Union. And Thomaston.
I just let 3 new people in and now 2 more.
Okay. So we'll wait a couple minutes. Stephen.
I bet Larry Sturz was sorry he asked what we wanted him to talk about.
Yeah, I bet. Are you officially on now, Stephen?
I am, as of last night.
Yeah, welcome.
Yes, welcome. All right.
At least that's what Select Person Gerritsen told me.
It was unanimous, Stephen.
All right.
And then Sarah Ann Smith and Melissa Hall are coming in now.
Okay.
Good, because I think Melissa needs a little bit of some support. I watched a Hope meeting last night. I think some fortitude going into their talks with LCA.
Jordan, can you say that one more time?
Right, we need to get you some decent internet, Jordan.
Yeah.
I don't know who your provider is, but we need to get you something better.
Yeah.
So bad. Well, I just watched the Hope Select Board meeting last night, and I'm sure Melissa and Sarah can use a little bit of support. I think they're going in to talk to LCI again next week, and there was just some misconceptions floating around the board meeting that I think that probably could be cleared up tonight or in a private message.
All right.
Sure.
I just want to remind everyone that we are being recorded right now. And so this is a live recording of the our little group. So I just want to mention that, Deb, and maybe you can take off from there.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. So it's 5:03. I'll call the meeting to order.
Deborah,
Yes.
Deborah, before you start, can I ask Jeremy a question? How do we get to the live stream on the Camden website?
You'd actually go to the YouTube Town of Camden's YouTube channel. So
Is that the top, that link on the top of the homepage?
I actually have never gone there from there, but you subscribe to the Town of Camden's YouTube channel. You don't have to do that. You can just go to YouTube and put in Town of Camden and it'll come up.
All right.
I just pasted the link in the chat.
Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'm just scanning here. I think I have everybody. So what's happening is that Shelley Patton from Northport, who graciously volunteered to take minutes at the last meeting, has volunteered to do so again today. She cannot be here, but she is going to do it after reviewing the YouTube. So I am going to, in order to assist her, I am going to read off who I believe is here. And if I don't read your name, please let me know at the end. Matt Siegel, Jeremy Martin, Craig Curry, Sarah Smith, Melissa Foster, Josh Gerritsen, Jordan Barnett Parker, Stephen Coltai, Jacob Post, Ben Dorr, Denise Munger, John Bieman, Joe Stronowski, Peter Milanazzo is here, and John Gibbons and Sandy Moore. Did I miss anybody?
Did you mention Mark Ratner? I don't know that. I heard
There you are, Mark. I didn't see you. You snuck in on me. Thanks. Anybody else that didn't hear their name? All right. It's going to be kind of hard, I think, for her to do that without by doing that YouTube. Okay. All right. Great. So the first item we have on the agenda is to approve the March 10th, 2021 minutes, which we sent around with the agenda. Did anybody see anything that concerned them? Again, Shelley did them for us.
looked all good to me.
Okay. Well,
Actually, Deb, I did have a question on that.
yeah, John. That's
Where did we land with your conversation with GWI on Midcoast Internet Solutions. Do you know, did you guys do anything there?
Oh, yeah, so I can report on that, but that's not a change to the minutes, right?
No,
Because-
it's not a change. I just wanted to make sure I asked
Yeah,
you about
gotcha.
it.
I'll do that as soon as we approve them
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes.
okay.
I'll second that.
And who is that?
Mark Ratner made the motion.
Okay,
Matt Seeger will
Matt.
second.
Matt seconded. And all in favor? Just say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? We're not an official group. If we were the select board, we would have to do a roll call. We're not going to do it, okay? So all ayes, no nays. And I'm just doing, again, this to help Shelley. Okay, to your point, John Beeman, good question. We went back to, I did go back to GWI, and GWI has no problem with the Midcoast internet name, and I have that in writing from them. So we are good to go. Okay, so moving on to the next agenda item is really just kind of updates on prior items. As you know, we had the homework assignments, which was to identify number of passings that we have and road miles. And the idea of that was to put all those numbers together. Each town, pretty much each town submitted to me their information, and we provided that information to Finley. We have not chosen Finley. Finley was supposed to give us a table by which we could more or less estimate how much their feasibility study would be based on what towns are in, what towns are out, et cetera, et cetera. So because we don't know what towns are in, what towns are out, we needed a means of being able to kind of basically estimate what our feasibility study costs would be. Finley acknowledged they'd been out of town. They're crazy busy like everybody else in the fiber area. And they will get back to us with that, probably Excel spreadsheet that enables us to do that. But they have not done that yet. So that's where that stands. If you're a town that doesn't know what I'm talking about, then you probably haven't submitted that homework.
I'm letting a couple people in, Brian Doyle, and then someone else I let in too.
So, okay, so Brian has just
And
joined us.
James Kosuth is coming in. Kosuth. Brian Doyle.
Okay.
And Ann Freening is in.
And Anne is with us as well. And was there somebody else, or that was Anne. Okay, great. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yep.
Keep me updated on that. All right, so then the next thing is just to update you on the adoption of the guiding principles. After I sent out the copy, what I've been doing is on the guiding principles, in order to keep track, at the bottom of the guiding principles, I have adopted by the following main towns, and it lists the town and it says the date in which they were adopted. Right after I sent out the agenda a week or so ago, Union advised me that they had adopted the guiding principles. I think that was on April 6th. Anyway, it's in my typed version. It just doesn't show up in your attachment to the agenda.
Rockland just approved them on Monday as well.
Right. You know, I had heard that, but okay, Rockland on Monday. And that would have been the 12th, huh? Okay. Great. Thanks, man. Okay, great. All right, so did on the subject of the guiding principles, one of the things that we thought we would ask is, do those of you whose towns had adopted them or haven't adopted them, did you feel that you got pushback, or were people pretty unanimously, solidly behind them? Did a lot of questions arise as to what some of the items meant? We just would like the feedback from the towns. Yeah, Ben.
Happy to go first. Matt came and presented to us briefly on the 12th at our meeting, and most of the questions for him were pretty technically oriented, just about, fiber in general. And but we had a unanimous vote on the guiding principles, and there certainly wasn't a lot of conversation about the intent of the coalition, I would say. Mostly just questions about fiber and the technical aspects of it. And we didn't even get into the financial question of it too much since it's so far out.
Okay, great. It's hard to see everybody on this. Let me see if I can switch this to gallery view so I can see you all better.
Deborah?
Yeah, Mark Ratner, yeah.
Camden's 100% behind it.
Okay. Great. Sarah.
Hope has questions. Basically, a lot of this is coming to us all so recently. Melissa's been involved from the get-go, and I'm getting up to speed, and I'm in support. I definitely support what you're doing, but we need to get the other select board members on board. And to do that, they need more information about what exactly is involved, what the time frame is. And I don't know if you saw, I'd sent you an email this morning, Deborah, about
Okay.
We're having a special select board meeting, an extra one next week for budget, but LCI needs an answer about a grant application, and they need, if we decide to go with that, they would need to know by about the middle of next week. So we're going to discuss it at next week's meeting. And we were hoping that you or someone could be there to explain more than I'm capable of explaining.
And that's on Tuesday?
Yeah, on Tuesday at 6:30, and we've got 2 items on the agenda. So if you or someone can be there, we can absolutely put you first or put you second, depending on your availability.
Okay. Okay, and we're happy to do that. I know that Matt joined Rockland and Thomaston. I think I had and of course some of your board meetings conflict with my board meetings while I'm chairing the Rockport Select Board, but that won't be long. But anyway, we've got, Matt is great, and he's done some of them, or I can do them. So either way, we're happy to do it. Yeah, Mark.
Thank you.
I do have a quick question. Obviously, Camden will have 2 new board members come July 1st. And we have 3 people. I'm not sure, there's over 3 people running. I'm pretty confident that one of the people running is in favor of the program. I don't know yet about the other 2. Curious what you think, because you're going to have 2 new members in Rockport, correct?
Right.
Do you have any idea of what that may do to the makeup of the board there?
Well, no idea what it will do to the broadband makeup, but I can say that Camden, I think, is going to be putting the warrant article, hopefully approving the warrant article next week for going on your ballot.
Yes.
I'm getting a little bit ahead of the agenda, but Rockport approved it on Monday night. So it is going on the warrant article. So by the time we have new board members on board, the regional utility, assuming Camden passes it and Rockport passes it in terms of our voters, then we will have a legal structure. That legal structure then will have its own board of directors. And, it's not like we can go backwards.
Great. Okay.
So I think that's good timing from that perspective, from both of our standpoints.
Yes.
Yeah. So we should be thinking, and this is a message for Camden and Rockport in particular, we should be thinking about whether or not we need that legal structure in place before we name our board of directors representative, or whether or not we can name the board director representative should the legal structure come into place while we currently have the boards that we have. Just a thought. So,
Okay.
you know,
Well, we've got some time to work that out.
we should chat about that. But that's the only other thing that, you know, might be of any concern, I think. So, yeah, Ben.
I don't want to get too mired down into that specific question, but are you expecting the municipalities to elect their own representatives to the board of directors of the municipal utility, or is that, how are you expecting that process to work?
Yeah, that's what the interlocal agreement calls for, is that the municipality elects their one board representative. And of course, the idea, I mean, it's not required, it's not spelled out in the interlocal agreement, but the idea is not that you have that person change every year. I mean, this is a utility that needs to have some consistency. And in fact, if we can build something like that, you know, longer terms or something like that into the, you know, into the bylaws, we can do that. You know, we kept the interlocal agreement pretty high level, simple, because to change it needs to go back, except for Rockland, we need to go back and get a town vote. So you don't want to have to do that again and again. And so, so the devil in the detail, you know, can be in the bylaws. But what is clear in the interlocal agreement is that every town that that is a part of the regional utility has one board member, and everybody has an equal vote. There's no weighted votes like some of us have in our, you know, old, you know, waste disposal. You know, Midcoast solid waste, for example, has a weighted vote, which has always been contentious, and we didn't want to go that way. So we all have a weighted vote. I mean, we all have an equal vote. But yeah, the municipality elects the individual. One other thing that has been problematic in the past is that I know in the Midcoast solid waste, one provision says that it needs to be a select board member, if possible. Otherwise, it could be somebody that's not a select board member. In this instance, we think the select board membership is really not that relevant. We want people who bring the right skills and understanding to the regional utility board, right? So no mention whatsoever of select board membership preferred or anything. So, yeah, John.
Yeah, quick question there. Are we required to elect a representative by the voters, or can the selectmen do that?
No, the selectmen do it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I was
Like you
concerned
would.
about two referendums 6 months apart.
Yeah, no. I mean, you know, the idea is that, of course, who knows what the future holds, right? But the idea is that once a town approves or puts the warrant, but for Rockland, because you guys are different, and you can do it through your town council. But for the rest of, you know, of any of the towns, once a town puts it on the warrant and the town, you know, voters approve the interlocal agreement, then it should never have to, you know, you should never have to go back to the voters again on this topic. I mean, theoretically, right? And like, as I say, Camden and Rockport do it this time around. If all of a sudden, you know, we have Owl's Head putting it on, for example, in November, then Owl's Head voters have to approve joining it, but the Camden and Rockport don't have to go back and approve Owl's Head. The mechanism that's set up is that the board of directors of the utility has to accept the town. And the reason is obviously that, you know, this entity has to be financially viable. And it might be that, you know, that the entity can't take a dozen towns all at the beginning. I can tell you that. It's going to sink of its own weight, and none of us are going to get fiber. So what we have to do is a staged approach, and we won't know really more about that, what makes sense for, you know, what towns, until we do the feasibility study. So it's all, this kind of gets into future agenda items, but I don't care. We can address it now since we're sort of on a roll on it. So the issue then is that the board of directors, the then board of directors, whether that consists of 2 towns or 4 towns, has to unanimously agree to admit another town. So, So that's the process. So the two things have to happen. The board of directors of the utility has to say yes unanimously, and the town's voters for that new town have to say yes. And that's the process.
And those two things can happen in either order. So if the,
Yeah.
okay. Yep.
Yeah, either order. Yep. Anything else on that? There might be more questions on this topic as we kind of go along the agenda, but for the moment, we're good. Okay. All right. So the next item on the agenda was really, it should say Hall, Siegel, and Munger report on the activities since the last meeting, because Denise has been very active, and if I assume will hopefully be the representative on the for Rockport on the board, and so she has gotten very active and really up to speed on everything now. Hey, one thing, by the way, that Denise has found very helpful, as did I, was that fiber book I told you guys about. Who wrote it, Denise? Susan Crawford. You're on mute, but Susan Crawford. I could read lips. Okay.
That's good. Yeah,
Yeah,
the main broadband caucus was meeting this last week. They all decided that they should all read it, that it's really the sort of critical piece of information to give people the background they need.
I mean, even for those of us who think that we know something about fiber, it's valuable. It's very valuable. Jeremy?
I'm letting Clifford Dasco in.
Oh, great. Okay.
What's the name of the book, Deb?
It's called Fiber. There is there's a longer title, but it really, if you just Google Fiber by Susan Crawford, you'll get it.
Great, thanks.
Yep. So we've got Clifford just joined us.
So
Hello, Cliff. Okay, so we're basically reporting on we're on the top of page 2 on the agenda, Cliff. So we have been having a number of meetings with legislative representatives, with Susan Collins's office, and rather than go through every one of them, but Susan Collins's office, Senator King's office, Peggy Schaefer, the executive director from Connect Maine, joined us with Senator King's team. And basically the message there was, we talked about the ARP funds that were coming down. We talked about the block grants that are coming to the towns and to the county and counties. And we talked about how we have a lot of concern that ISPs are being preferred for grants generally. And that while there might have been a reason for doing that back when towns were not up to speed and towns were not doing municipal networks, that we believe that with a lot of this funding that's coming in now, that there needs to be a preference for municipal and regional networks. And of course, when you listen to what's going on the legislation, which probably which may not be passed soon, which is the infrastructure bill, we've been hearing and reading a lot of good language about exactly that, preferring municipal and regional networks. How exactly the ARP funds that are earmarked for broadband, which Senator King expects to be about 120 million, how that gets distributed is a different story. So let me back up a little bit, because there's a lot of confusion, I think, about the various grants. And so, the various amounts, pools of pots of money. So there are block grants that are going to the town, every town. So you automatically as a town get a certain amount based on your population. And it can range anywhere from, I think the smallest I've seen is 110,000 to, I think Rockland gets 700 and some thousand, again, based on population. So you don't have to apply, you don't have to be underserved, you don't, and those funds can be spent on a a variety of specified things, and the Treasury is going to, I guess, issue more or issue guidance on that in the next 60 days. But it really was intended to be sort of one time, post-COVID economic development, let's get things going type of expenditure. So we at the regional utility are really urging towns to take at least, I don't know, but at least 50%. And I could make an argument for 100% of those funds to put toward the broadband. We have to have seed money to go out to get municipal loans or to issue revenue bonds. It's just like having a mortgage. You've got to put some money down, say 10% down. You have to have the seed money. So beyond just the feasibility study, you need that seed money. And, so if we need, X number of $1 million, we could all spend the next 5 years trying to knock on the doors of private investors to try to raise that money. Or we can, if we're serious about the coalition efforts and the broadband efforts, we could go forward. Those of us who are joining the actual interlocal agreement could go forward then and put, a certain amount of those funds in for that seed money. But aside from that, the Knox County alone is going to get $7.71 million. Waldo's supposed to get $7.7 million. And while we have a couple of Waldo towns, here, most of the towns are Knox County. We think that there's a lot of good arguments for why Knox should put that money into broadband infrastructure. And, rather than to bore you with all that, we're going to do bullet points. We're going to draft a suggested letter to the county commissioners that we're going to ask all the towns to sign on to. Whether you've decided to go with the interlocal agreement or not, if you believe in getting broadband, we hope that those towns will sign on to encourage Knox County, for example, to put in that money into the broadband effort. Recall that they got $8 million or so out of the, CARES grant previously.
18 million, really.
18?
For the airport.
It was 18. I keep thinking it was 8. It was 18. Well, I have confirmed with some town managers that it was related to the airport. They haven't spent it all. They don't know what to spend it on. So, my God, give us that 7.71 for broadband. We know what to spend it on. So anyway, obviously the arguments, it's a 3-generational investment, et cetera, et cetera. The fiber you hang today is going to be there, at least 50 years, maybe more. So anyway, so those are the block grants. They go to the towns, they go to the county, no questions asked, no, just automatic. Then there is the broadband.
Before you move on, Deborah, is there any feedback from the members at this point, from those of you who are hearing this? Because we are banging our heads trying to find seed money. So I'd love to, at this point, Deborah, if it's okay, see what the initial feedback is, what the initial reaction is. If your town is getting $300,000 that's been earmarked, and one of those particular earmarks is broadband, how do you feel just instinctively as a select board member or as a broadband committee member in terms of allocating? So I see Sarah's hand is up there.
Sarah?
As usual, the budget committee and some of the select board members are going to be very hard to convince on how to use those funds if they could, for example, use them on roads, because we have some major work to do on roads out here. And so it's, I was just thinking about it. We are having a very large turnover on our select board. The good news is that the people who are probably coming back onto the board are former select board members, but they tend to be fairly conservative. And I don't know how many of them will be willing to take this is a once in a multi-generation opportunity and run with it. So I can just about guarantee that they're not going to want to devote 100% of those funds. And I don't know that even 50% is viable. If I had the sway to make it happen, I think it's essential. But we need to do a lot of educating about what this interlocal agreement can do, how soon it can do it, because last night we were talking, Josh, after you signed off, we had a whole nother part of the discussion, and I was able to explain to them some of the problems with LCI's approach and their contract requirements. And we're all just kind of going, what do we do? We've got the opportunity to get broadband for the rest of our population in the next 12 to 18 months with LCI, or we've got unknown future with interlocal. But in the long run, to me, it's the way to go. So it's going to be a tough road, tough sell.
Well, I understand that. I understand, obviously, as a select board member, that there's always roads. We never have enough money for roads. But, as soon as we put this money into roads, we're going to need road money next year and the following year and every year. And so hopefully we can convince some select boards that this is a one-time special windfall, something that we didn't tax it has nothing to do with the mill rate on our taxpayers. It is a windfall that we never expected. It's intended for economic development. I don't think that roads really go to economic development. I mean, if you don't have roads, it's one thing, but people don't move here because they say, oh, gee, you got great roads. They move here because the first question they're asking real estate brokers now, and that's been confirmed, is, do you have broadband? That's the reason, that's a make or break thing as opposed to the roads. And so, number one, we had to get that point across. Number two, I think that at some point, and I don't think, obviously, we're not expecting that towns who have not joined the interlocal agreement, or that we haven't accepted into the interlocal agreement at some point, that they're going to hand over that money. Obviously, that's absurd, to think that. And so, but the question would be, if your town is serious about joining the interlocal agreement, and if you're accepted into the interlocal agreement at this stage, or around 2 or around 3, you might need to have those funds. We've always said we're not going to tax taxpayers for this, and this is not taxing taxpayers. And so if you've got some towns who do in fact come forward and say put 50% in, it might become, I don't know, I'm just saying, it could become sort of the cost of doing business of entry, because you can imagine some towns, well, you're not going to say, well, you have to put in the same amount as this town, but if the towns that are in it, that's a big if, guys, if the towns that are in it put in 50%, I wouldn't be surprised if they require that the towns who come in put in 50%, at the time that they come in. I don't know. It's just something that we need to be thinking about before we go putting it to roads. So anyway, just thoughts for consideration. So I think Josh had his hand up first, and then Jordan.
Yeah, I just want to say that in what was in our packet on Monday night from the National League of Cities under eligible expenditures, roads are not on there. Now, Treasury will provide additional guidance, but the things that are spelled out are water, sewer, and broadband, as well as performing mentions lost wages due to COVID or something like that, but I don't see anything about roads.
If basically we don't have enough information about what the money's going to be able to be used for, and if it's narrow like that, then we've got a much better shot.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Jordan, were you still trying to say something? I don't think, or yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, just because I did see the Hope meeting the other night, Sarah, and I just wanted to reemphasize, and this isn't to convince you to go one way or another, but going with LCI to get the grant, as the people were saying during the meeting, will not change anything in the town. The only thing it's going to do is give them money. and they said that they're not going to install it to anyone's homes, and you know, you kind of had to draw that out of them like venom last night. But getting extra money to them is not going to change anyone's position. They're still going to have to pay $1,200 to get it installed to their house. So whether you do that or not, that's the reality of the situation. But what you're doing by putting your support behind them is, one, you're taking money out of the hands of another municipality, or maybe even yourself if Hope decided to apply for those funds. But you're also emboldening LCI's position by kind of relinquishing your guys' power, if that makes any sense. Because, if you would like to see, I believe it was I think it was March 22nd meeting with them. I asked very specific questions about how them receiving grant money would affect their service to the towns, and they said it would make it worse. I asked a whole series of questions, and they admitted because they're overwhelmed. They don't have the staff, and that by building out in different towns with this money would in fact hinder that service. So I would recommend maybe watching that if you have time. It starts, I think it's like an hour and 45 minutes is where that questioning goes. But sorry, that's what I had to just say about that, because I did listen very carefully to all of your guys' meeting yesterday, and some of the concerns that people were expressing about needing to move forward and how could it hurt to move forward with LCI. And I just wanted to
That's why we want Deborah or Matt or somebody to come that has a better grasp of the big picture than I do, and has more of the details and facts to explain it, because I'm not well versed enough to be able to do that.
Yeah, and Sarah, we'll be happy to do that. Let me just say this, that when it comes to, if you need to grasp the facts with respect to LCI, you know, Matt or me are not the people to do that. I don't think the Midcoast Internet Coalition per se wants to weigh in on LCI or whatever, because it's not been our experience. It's Lincolnville or somebody else can weigh in on LCI.
Yeah, and so if you want to come and help speak, basically, Deborah, we want you and or Matt or whomever, so that we can explain what this group is about and this sort of public utility is about. And then anybody that's got more details, we were able, we did seem to get some sort of semi-commitment from LCI to at least get the fiber to the end, to the road, but not more than that. So
yeah, and just, I mean, I asked them specifically if it would go to every home, and they said no. And then out of the number that they specified, they said when they write the grant, they will choose a number. So they're going to choose what makes sense for that grant application. So it won't be the full 700 or 500. And that is something we need to remember. So I think between our meeting and Lincolnville's meeting, their answers, they're not promising 100% coverage, and they're not promising to go to every house. And they did Alan did slip in there that even though the Connect Main grants are typically 12 months, you can apply for an extension, and it could be 18 months for Hope, he said. And then he said, but you can also apply for an extension to that. And so given the way the CARES grant has moved on and moved on and moved on, and then when I asked him, perhaps we could have a negotiation and have a contract where we could stipulate that X number of houses need to be done in this amount of time, because he had been applying, propositioning other towns. He went out and said there are no other towns. It's Appleton, Bremen, I think it was Waldoboro, which there are 7, but we know that he went to Washington. We know that, so I think we need to, whether it's just for Hope, and I'm sure Lincolnville has already done this, put down the facts of what they aren't delivering.
Okay. So I think that, obviously there's a lot of frustration on this topic. And so Lincolnville and Hope have to, you guys are best in terms of sharing information, and anybody, in terms of your experience with LCI. And I think this is, good information, but we've got quite a bit of agenda here. So we need to have those discussions kind of offline with one another. John? You're on mute. Still on mute. You're still on mute, John. Yeah. No, you're still on mute. Okay.
Wow, I clicked it 3 times.
All right.
Question for Jordan. Jordan, where is that recording you talked about?
I will write it in the chat so that I won't take up any more time. Is that okay?
Okay.
You'll find it in the chat. Okay, great. Yeah, Ben.
Just going to give you Rockland's perspective briefly from the conversations that I've had with other counselors, which is that I think a number of them are excited about the possibility of this project in terms of the financial commitment. I expect that a lot of the conversation will be, during my time on council, there's been a lot of conversations about where to find seed funding for something like a large scale weatherization project in the city. How to, anything to leverage funds into more affordable housing, which is something that we're really struggling with, which is something that all of us are really struggling with. And so just to give you my perspective from the city of Rockland, I haven't had a really concrete financial conversation with any of the other counselors because it feels like that's still a ways down the road. But I do know that I'm confident that it's not going to be any more difficult than getting another constituency to commit to the sum that we're asking for. But there are other projects that people are going to be interested in using this money for.
Sure,
So,
there are, and there are going to be restrictions on what they can be used for too, as we know. So,
Sure.
And so the one thing I hope that we can all agree, though, and Sandy, I'm calling you next. Sandy, go ahead, and then I'll follow up with that.
Oh, I was just going to give you a quick update on Thomaston. We did, the select board did agree, they unanimously to send the interlocal agreement to the voters in June. So that was passed and that will be on the voters warrant article for June. There are a few people on the select board that have had fiber in the past, so they were very excited about it. But like everybody else, there's a lot of questions. We're scheduling a workshop that hopefully we can even get you or Matt to come to. I know Brian Doyle has somebody that's going to speak at that workshop too. So that's where we're heading, is more information, I think, just like everybody else.
Sure, and that's great, Sandy. And I don't want to suggest that Camden or Rockport have had these discussions about the 50% or anything either. So, I mean, we're just urging towns to do that, but we're also urging our own towns to do it. So don't think that, we're out any further ahead of you on that score. But the one thing that I hope that we all can agree to, at least those of us who are Knox County, is that if we were to put together a letter with all the rationale as to why that 7.71 million ought to be, or as much as possible of it, ought to be going to broadband infrastructure, then I hope that the towns will be able to sign on to that, because that doesn't affect the the monies that are coming to your own individual community, and especially considering that they've gotten such a windfall at the county level in the past. So we'll obviously make that available, pass it around. Everybody will have the opportunity to tweak it and say, oh, can't sign it, and you really need to change this or whatever. Great. So once we finalize that, we really need to do soon, then we hope that we can get everybody to sign on there. And if you're not in, Knox County, then one thing to consider is, approaching, if it's Waldo County, approaching that county and saying, hey, you take all the towns and you divide up the towns based on population, then maybe you contribute this much on our town's behalf to the to broadband infrastructure if we wind up being accepted into the interlocal agreement. Anyway, those are all things that we need to be considering, and there'll be more for us to consider. But that funding really is supposed to come the first I think the first portion of the funding comes soon, this summer.
Yeah,
And the
the,
second one next year, I think.
yeah,
Dee?
Treasury is supposed to issue the guidance by the 11th of May, 60 days from.
And then it has to be a certain number of days or months or whatever after that by which we get the first tranche of funding, I think. And then I think a year later, the second tranche of funding. So,
And it's got to be spent by, I think, like 2024,
yeah,
or it
that's
goes
right.
back.
Yeah, yeah, Ben.
If we convince the county to give us $7.1 million, does that relieve the burden of having to commit 50% of our own funds? I mean, I know it's a very high level question that you probably don't have an answer to, but what's your feeling like? What's the best lever to push? Probably all of them at once, but what do you
Probably
think
all
about
of them
that?
at once. Yeah, I'm with you, Ben. I probably all of them at once to see what we can get, right? But obviously the county is the big, the big piece, and it might very well be if we can get the county funds, then we don't have to worry about the municipality funds. I don't know. I mean, those are all decisions that that we have to collectively be talking about and making. And I know that there have been approaches to the county administrator about, about the idea, and there hasn't been, I don't think, any pushback at this point. So, but it's the commissioners who, make the decision. So that's what we need to really focus on. So then, okay, so
Can I just jump in there just for one second? Ben, I just want to mention just quickly that a number like 7.71 puts us well beyond the 18 to 20% threshold that we would need in reserve for favorable status for both the revenue bonds and for the low interest muni loans. Again,
that's a good piece of information to know.
It is. So it takes, not to be glib, but it takes a lot of pressure off on many levels. One, to the town, Ben, that you and I have talked about specifically, but then also in terms of, and Steve Koltai is here someplace, there he is over there, in terms of favorable status as we approach in terms of creating our financial model and our lenders and or bond underwriters.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. The only thing that I would caveat that I would say to that is that you can expect that this, this entity is going to be bleeding money for the first few years in terms of operational costs versus revenue coming in. It's going to be, it's going to be in the red. There's no question. They all start that way. They're in the red. And so that's the tricky, risky period. And so the more money we have, the more money we have to get us to survive that risky period. So,
and Deborah and Matt, I think that's what the communities need, that grounded logic to get a sense of this will propel this plan to move forward as smoothly as possible. If we can acquire capital up front from a variety of sources, particularly from where the largest source is, and that would be the county. I mean, that's just economics right there. And Matt, you right. Phrased that very clearly. That's something I think Sandy and I would be happy to share with the select board in terms of this is sort of a path to success that this coalition sees as a successful way to begin.
Well, and I would only add to that, Brian, that I think part of the commitment aspect, as you look at a letter of intent and moving into an interlocal, there has to be a commitment from each town. Deborah may use the word buy-in. Again, you pick the phrase that you wish that works best. But at a certain point, as you have joined, I think there also needs to be a financial commitment from the town, either as good faith and or as, again, it's not a bond, but it would certainly be a buy-in, to use Deborah's term.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And what's one of the things as a select board, what I said on Monday, again, the expression was, boy, we wish we had been talking for 2 years like Rockport and Camden have, because they just need more education, more information so that they can feel that they can be prepared, knowledgeable to make good decisions. So that's why we're going to bring someone in to talk about learn more about Broadband 101 and just try and move forward with this to give the select board knowledge.
Yep. And as a non-agenda item, Deb, Brian, I don't know what the invitation situation would be there, but Jeremy Martin here in Camden, invites people to participate. I think it would be great if it's possible, Brian, to invite coalition members, whatever you're putting, if you could host Again, I don't know the terms of your speaker, but it'd be great if we can try to invite members of the coalition.
Well, excellent idea. What I want to do is I want to make sure, and Sandy, stop me if you think it's appropriate, but I'd want to, this was intended initially to educate the select board because they feel a need to be comfortable asking questions. And in that environment, I'll certainly approach the chair and the town manager with this interesting inquiry just to see if we can extend that. So that's a great question. Thank you, Matt.
Well, thank you for considering it. Only because, Brian, as you know, Deborah and I have been doing what we call the State of the Union. We've been with Ben, so Ben and Tom down in Rockland, up in Northport, out to Searsmont, with you folks in Thomaston, Owlshead. So again, information is the key. Communication is the key. Having an informed citizenry is hugely important in all this.
I don't think anyone in the room doesn't want better service. I think the path is, what's the best path for this community? So that we go forward with confidence? That's the question we're being asked.
So just being mindful of the time here, let me move from to the other pot of funding, and then we'll get off of this this particular topic and move on to another one. And so we talked about the block grants to the towns, right, and the block grants to the counties, and then the third portion of funding is the estimated by Senator King's office 120 million that is being earmarked for broadband infrastructure that is coming to Maine. So that's 120 million. Now, as you know, as things stand right now, typically that 120 million would naturally go to Connect Maine, and Connect Maine, you know, awards the grants based on whatever they've been doing and based on the fact you have to be underserved or unserved at this point. And so those funds are not coming to those of us who, you know, to Thomaston or Rockland or Camden or Rockport, and they'd be going to unserved. Now, under Connect Maine's rules and under Connect Maine's practices, they go to ISPs instead of to, you know, typically instead of to municipalities and regions. So what we've been doing is talking to some legislators, to Seth Berry, to Paige Ziegler from Lincolnville and some other towns. And we've been trying to urge them to say, hey, you know, this worked. Giving this to ISPs worked at a time when when the towns weren't up to speed and there weren't these regional efforts. But where you have a town who has, for example, signed the guiding principles, where you have a town that's a part of the coalition, signed the guiding principles and said, we don't want a monopoly in our town. We want universal access. We want open access. We want all these things. Then why should you, Connect Maine, be giving money, federal taxpayer money to ISPs to further monopolistic behavior? So we've been very upfront about that, and we've been pushing, you know, some of those state legislators pretty hard on it, and that needs to be done more. And anybody else should be, you know, pushing their state legislator as well. But that we've been making some headway in the sense that there's a Gigabit Fund that has never been funded, but it is a Gigabit Fund that's on the books in Maine. And there are some who have suggested that maybe that 120 million could go. There's pending legislation on a couple of relevant areas here I won't bore you with, but maybe that funding could go to this Gigabit Fund, and that would sort of circumvent perhaps or create the opportunity for different rules of distribution of that 120 million. So again, I would not, you know, I wouldn't count on that 120 million, and I certainly wouldn't count on it unless you're unserved and whatever. But we are trying to do whatever we can to, you know, to get some access for this region to that 120 million. And mostly to municipal and regional efforts as opposed to going to ISPs.
Deborah, quick question. Now, when Connect Maine talks about underserved, I think this points to the fact that the speed test is critical, because there may be parts of the community that you're not aware of that are very, very much underserved. So again, that could allow each community to find pockets of capital that they could pull to them for their own use.
Absolutely.
possibly, again.
Yep.
Just a thought.
Denise? I
A
think
further
Denise.
complicating factor is at the last Connect Maine board meeting, the board asked the staff to consider what the appropriate definition of broadband was. And the sense I got is they are pushing them to go to 100 over 100, which would mean we have a lot more underserved and unserved areas with that definition.
Oh my, yes.
Yes, it would change it would definitely change the change the landscape. Melissa?
Do we know, can towns individually apply for the Connect Maine money with the intention of that money going into the coalition? Or
It's a good question, Melissa, because the towns, the community-driven grants are supposed to be, sort of town focused, right? They're not the expansion grants for the ISPs, although they've been giving them to the ISPs. But yes, I mean, according to the website, according to Connect Maine, it says that the money can go to either a municipality or other recognized state entity. And as soon as we have this legal infrastructure of the once two towns approve the legal infrastructure of the interlocal agreement and that regional utility is up and running, then, which is June 8th, assuming that it passes both our towns, then it is an entity that could receive that funding.
because I'm wondering if all of the towns could put in for, I think the second round for Connect Maine is in July. If all of us could put in for a grant and just see if it's successful, see if we can, it's just a thought.
It's a good thought. It's a good thought. And somebody should take it on to maybe work on that. But yeah, no, let's not lose that as a very good thought. So that kind of gets us, well, that does actually get me to the next thing that I had on the agenda, which really we're bouncing around a little bit, but that's okay. I mean, we already talked about the ARP Act, but I did have outline discussions on the interlocal agreement, letter of intent, et cetera. So let's talk about that interlocal agreement again for a minute. The reason that Camden and Rockport went ahead, we have been at this longer than most. And the reason, we went ahead to go ahead and get that on the warrant article was so that we could create ASAP, a legal structure for exactly what we were talking about, Melissa. So we have a legal entity that can receive funds, because, the coalition is not any recognized, it's not a legal entity, it's not a state, state recognized entity, but the regional utility is an official recognized state entity that can apply for and receive funds once it's set up after the successful vote of two towns on June 8th. So that's why we proceeded as quickly as we could. We don't get any kind of special votes. I think what we did do, we're the charter municipalities. Rockport and Camden are set up as the charter municipalities. And we set us up so that we could be the, just to get us going, we will be on the executive committee, and the only advantage that we get as charter municipalities is that we're always on the executive committee. The president of the board or the officers of the board are on the executive committee, and let's just say that Rockport and Camden are not officers of the board at some point, they would still get to be on the executive committee. That's it. That's the only advantage they get to being a charter municipality. They don't get 2 votes, they only get the same vote as everybody else and all of that. But the main thing is they are putting in the money up front right now and getting this legal structure going. So that's it. So they have a little bit of say at that executive committee level. That's it going forward. So I already explained what the process is for joining on to the interlocal agreement, that those 2 things have to happen. And as Ben said, they don't have to happen in any particular order. And now this needs to be, I just want to take this opportunity to make sure that everybody's clear on a letter of intent versus joining the interlocal agreement. So for those of us who have waste, waste facilities like Midcoast Solid Waste, we had that was formed, just taking our Midcoast Solid Waste for an example of Camden, Rockport, Hope, and Lincolnville, that was formed decades ago through an interlocal agreement as this one is being formed. and has its own bylaws, of course, and it can't, it is a legal, it is a legal entity, it's a not-for-profit corporation, and it'll have its own articles of incorporation, which will be quickly filed with the Secretary of State. It will have its own bylaws that will be adopted by the initial board of directors and all of that. So once you join the interlocal agreement, you are in for death, until death do us part, okay? I mean, there are ways of getting out of it, right? But certainly, I mean, that is a commitment. That is a legal commitment to the group. That should be distinguished from a letter of intent. And so the letter of intent, also in your agenda item, where that is simply a non-binding, non-legal, non-binding document that just says to the coalition, we're serious about going down this route with you. And if we do sign the letter of intent, then we're not going to go off and accept funds from another ISP or go jump ship and go another way for a certain period of time. So for example, it gives the time for you, for your town and the coalition to be looking at the feasibility of bringing you in. And if it costs us money to go out and do that feasibility study that decides whether or not it's financially feasible to bring your town in or not. And we're not going to commit to that money and go out and do that unless you commit to us that you're the train we're taking if you accept us and if our voters agree. That's all it is. That's what the letter of intent is. But that's very different than actually entering into the legal structure of the interlocal agreement. Now, Thomaston, as Sandy said, is putting on their warrant the interlocal agreement, and if approved by the voters, that's great. That means that you have crossed that hurdle of you've got your voter authority for the select board to enter into it, but then you also need the the board of the utility then saying yes, it's financially feasible and welcome in. Okay. So I hope that's somewhat clear to people. Yes, Stephen.
It sort of, well, first of all, hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here and working with you now officially instead of unofficially as a Lincolnville rep. I think that, everyone agrees that one of the key challenges we will face with this whole ambitious project is public communication, explanation, buy-in. Of course, that starts with the select boards or whatever the governing entity is, Rockland City Council, but it extends beyond that. And so I'm wondering if it might be useful to have a kind of fact sheet with some key bullet points that are in plain English, not legal documents, that describe what it is we're about. And for example, the points you were just making, Deborah, about the difference between a letter of intent and signing on to the interlocal agreement, that's obviously going to be really important for elected officials to understand before they go ahead. I know, for instance, one of the key questions is going to be, is there a financial commitment attached to either of these two documents? If we sign a letter of intent, is that a financial commitment of some sort? If we sign the interlocal agreement, is that a financial commitment? So I'm just posing the option of doing some kind of fact sheet that's relatively short, 1 or 2 pager. Or I always think 1 pager could still be 2 sides of 1 page, so it could still be 2 pages, but that just explains what it is we're about, at least at this stage, including, by the way, talking about the things that are TBD. I mean, explain that this so far is a purely kind of bottoms up citizens and communities banding together. This is not a professional group. Everyone is a volunteer. There are lots of things that remain to be determined. We're going to update this fact sheet maybe as we go. We have a website where we're going to keep news and information. All of our meetings are open and recorded and available for anybody to see them. Here's where they are. That kind of thing. I'm just putting that out there as a thought.
Yeah, Stephen, I think it's a great idea. And we have been talking about that. Matt and I and others have been talking about that. And John Veheman is here and he's heading up our marketing committee. And maybe, Stephen, you might want to get in touch with John and maybe you might want to join the marketing committee. But I am hearing, and to your point, a very good point, that there could be a different set of bullets for a select board versus for the public generally. Because I totally take your point. A lot of what we're discussing today is not what's relevant to the public.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah and then Cliff.
Also, I just have a question. If the Hope Select Board ends up deciding to support LCI, but does that mean we are sort of forever banned? Because I think this is really important and I don't know if we can make them get it right now. And I agree that a handout like Steve's talking about would be fantastic. And it would be really helpful in convincing voters. And if we can convince the voters, they might be able to convince the rest of the select board. But, if, for example, next Tuesday, I'm outvoted and they say, yes, we need to go with LCI for this round, but that does not mean that we are committed to LCI beyond that. And we want to support this group. I think that I could see people wanting to vote to go for this round in the grant, but also supporting the guiding principles and perhaps even getting to a letter of intent in the coming months. Probably not until after the June election, given what's going on with membership on the Hope Select Board. So, but, are we locked out?
Well, I wouldn't use the term locked out, but I mean, let's look at it from the board, which has to have the financial welfare of the utility in mind.
I understand.
Okay?
I understand.
When you've got a board who's going to have to use their, if they're exercise their fiduciary responsibility, and they look at a situation where they have a town that is overbuilt or that is already built in large part, not to the home, but to the road, right? So they would have to be, quote, overbuilding fiber, which is something that is highly discouraged. And we've even been told we might not be able to even get funding from some investors to engage in any overbuilding. So it's a big, big hurdle for the utility to overbuild. Now, if you then go and let's just throw out it's $1 million. Let's just say that, that you go hand in hand, or you say, okay, to an ISP and say, go ahead. And, that when that $1 million could have gone to the regional utility to help fund this uphill battle you have for overbuilding, and you just gave it to an ISP who's going to exercise monopolistic behavior, that's going to be very tough for a board of directors wearing their fiduciary hats to say, oh, yeah, Hope, we'll let you in, no problem.
But right now, this board doesn't exist and isn't applying for grants.
No, but it will exist. But next time it will be in a position to.
So, and so, right now it's, to play devil's advocate, it's like you're asking towns to commit to something that doesn't exist, for which there are very few details. And you've got somebody saying, we've already installed fiber on, 80+% of your roads.
I understand you've got tough decisions to make, and we're not, we're not critical of Hope if they make the decision to go with an ISP. I mean, we get it, and we're not,
Yes.
we're still friends, but everybody has to. But we're just talking dollars and cents. I'm just, saying that it puts you in a difficult situation. Matt, I'm sorry, Cliff. Matt. Is that related to Sarah's question? What you were going to say, and then Cliff, I'll come back to you. Okay, just to finish off this.
I mean, Sarah, if it's okay, to the point of it's not so much even being friends. As I mentioned to you and Melissa when we did our State of the Union, our little one-on-ones, we hope that the Internet Coalition is there to help you make informed decisions. So even if you should decide to go with LCI, even in this round for the April 29th deadline, what I love about working with Sarah and Melissa, for both of you at this point, is that we're trying to figure out a way, if you make that choice, that it can still be in the best interest of your community. And Melissa, you've come up with some great ideas, and I think we need to pursue some of those. Apart from Sarah, whether you are joining, quote unquote, the coalition at this point. The coalition is there to help and guide as much as anything else.
That's right. And
thank you.
And that's right. And I think we've, said that before, that we just want towns. We're not upset if towns go a particular way. And we are there for a resource. We did talk to an entity today that has some ideas about your situation or Lincolnville situation, which I can't say anything more about because I don't know about, but soon we'll get back to you in terms of that. But, Cliff, you were next.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Cliff Dashow from South Thomaston, and we were late to the dance. And so much of this has gone on before we had representation from our town on this group. And I suspect there probably is a substantial gradient of knowledge about, not only about broadband in general, but also about the progress of formation of the group, what it intends to do, how it got to both the letter of intent and the interlocal agreement. So I'm endorsing in a backwards way, I'm endorsing Steve's point that says that there needs to be at least some consistency of knowledge so that when we go back to our towns and make an advocacy position for this, that not only is there an argument about why one would choose the coalition over an ISP arrangement, but also that there's specific use cases. And I think that when you tell the story about broadband and broadband access, the more discursive it can be, the more it involves storytelling, the better it is. And so I would make a plea for that to be part of it. But I also would like to support what I think of Steve's point was some degree of consistency of information flow so that we can speak with one voice when we go back to our towns.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's just that, we've only been at this for, what is this, our third meeting. And so we can't, we've been crazy busy. And so we just can't do all things, all at one time. And so we're totally on top of it. But and that is something that's really important. And John, I'm sure, is going to be working on that. And Cliff, we have been contacting all the individual towns individually and asking if we can have Zoom meetings with your select board, so that we can actually have, and we've done that with a number of these towns, so we can actually have a one-on-one with your select boards to try to answer some of your questions, bring you up to a particular level. But we definitely understand the need for the written materials.
Right. No, totally. But I totally agree with the one-on-one. But in order for that one-on-one, at least in my town, to be successful, there's got to be some base work done.
Yeah.
And there's got to be some groundwork laid. And I'm perfectly happy to participate in that process and to aid in it, but I need to know it as well.
Yeah. Okay. And Josh, you have your hand up, and then we have to move on to some other items before we run out of time.
Yeah, quickly, to the storytelling point, Matt and I plan on making at least one video, hopefully more, to help educate people. I mean, it's such a great, not only the one sheet, but at the minimum a 3-minute video that can be shared with everyone, and they can quickly watch it and just get a sense of what we're talking about, and then maybe more in-depth ones along the way.
So I'm sorry to cut anybody off, but you know, you can always email us, call us too. But there are a couple of things that we tried to finish these by 6:30. So there are a couple of things I just think that you really need to know about. So we had a very good call with Axiom Technologies today. We had not previously talked to Axiom. We talked to the CEO, Mark Ouellette. Am I saying that right, Stephen? Yeah.
Ouellette.
Sorry?
Ouellette.
Yeah, okay. And anyway, it was an excellent discussion. We asked him to give us a number on well, first of all, we hope that he'll be willing to, but to give us a number on a feasibility study for a certain group of towns. And so we expect to get some number from him on Friday. But we had a very, very interesting call with him. There were a lot of interesting build issues that we learned from him. He was it was a great wealth of information. Stephen, you obviously know him, and so we're very. When I say we, it was Denise and Matt and me who have been doing most of these conversations. But we will send out a report on some of that, some of that information that we gleaned, but it just happened this afternoon. But we were quite excited about it. Well, I'll just save it. But I mean, I'll just tell you one little thing, snippets. One of the things that Axiom Technology does is that it lays fiber sometimes, only in very appropriate circumstances in their view, on the ground. They don't hang it. I mean, of course they hang it most of the time off the poles, right? Everybody hangs it off the poles in Maine, but except for a few conduit situations and subdivisions, et cetera. But sometimes they have had great success in laying it on the ground in, like on the islands, maybe through some woods in certain circumstances. We talk about universal access. And sometimes, there's always the issue of, well, somebody lives a mile or 2 miles down a dirt road, and it's very expensive to get that fiber to them. But we've said we're committed to universal access, because if we don't do it, then we're no better than the monopolistic folks that say we're going to cherry pick. Well, what we learned today is perfect example of fiber on the ground. Keep in mind, the real cost is not not so much the fiber, but it's the make ready costs and all that stuff from hanging it on the poles, right? Perfect example of how to get it down the 1 mile or 2 mile dirt road or driveway is laying it on the ground. Huge. I mean, huge, cost saver. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we picked up from Mark today. It was
is it on the ground in a conduit, or is it just there on the ground?
On the ground. On the ground. Jacob.
I know back in the day when Midcoast Internet, not this Midcoast, the other Midcoast Internet, out on Squirrel Island, they did a fiber project for them, and that is literally going through the middle of the woods to all these little, expensive houses, feeding them with fiber, and it's literally laid on the ground, and then they direct burial cable, so it's heavy duty stuff, and it was then, across the lawn, it was trenched in. So
right.
X number of, like a foot or two so across being pushed up.
Right.
But in the woods on the ground, usually what happens is after a year, it's buried in everything.
Good point. And for those of Jacob, of course, knows this, but for those of you who don't know it, there's no electrical that's going through a fiber cable, so it's not a danger. There's no risk. And interesting thing that Mark had to say was that that they don't have any more problems with any damage or cuts to their fiber when they lay it on the ground, and actually less problems than when they put it on the pole. So it's really, really quite interesting. So, I mean, those are the kind, that's just one tiny example, but it makes a big difference in money wise. And so that's one of the things that really attracted us, because if you Google it, you can go out and look, Google Axiom Technologies. They've done all these feasibility studies, planning studies in in Vinyl Haven, 3 bridge towns, Georgetown. And what they do is not like a lot of fluff. They don't do that. And they also make it very clear. There's a real clarity of purpose and so forth in their studies that they do. Just fantastic. So I'm really quite excited about that potential relationship. Okay, so I wanted you to know about that. We don't have too much time to devote to it, but Matt, could you just hit the highlights of the workforce initiative, just so everybody knows what's being worked on there?
I can. I didn't know it was on the agenda, but I'd be happy.
It wasn't, and it was an oversight.
Steve Coltai is looking at me going, oh, "It's not on the agenda." Wait.
Right. Well, but it's
No.
we're still under, and actually, you guys, we're gonna get through this next part fast, but it's
Yeah.
on.
So I would happily just in 2 sentences.
Yep.
So Deborah, to your point, and I think I talked to Ben Dorr about this and a few others. 2 of the hurdles that we'll face in this project moving forward as it starts to move into the implementation stage are workforce shortages and material shortages. Material shortages we don't have much control over, as Corning is the main provider of this particular fiber that we'd be looking at. And right now, just as of today, when I spoke with one of their reps, they're about 18 months behind in terms of orders. But on the positive, one of the things that we can really work on, and Deborah, to your point, is to train a local workforce. So one of the issues we have here from all the vendors, from all the ISPs that we've heard, Deborah, is that they just won't have enough people to build. And so what we're looking to do is try and support that effort by working with the Maine Department of Labor, Joan Dolan, and a really sharp team, including Jason Judd from Maine Education. And we are trying to put together support for a $6 million federal grant, specifically for, as we've discussed, Deborah, for STEM-related workforce. And now we've added to Maine's application. The original application was for healthcare workers and for marine science workers. And we've added as a third column in that application for $6 million of funding for vocational training, we have added fiber technicians. And that includes linemen, that includes splicers, and that includes backhaul or backroom technicians.
We've shared that with Mark, for example, from Axiom today. He was very excited about it. So it's something that helps the ISPs, it helps us, it helps, so thanks, Matt. Matt is working with a group of people on it, and it would be, for example, people trained at the Midcoast School of Technology, and provides good jobs to local Maine folks, and it gets our build done faster, installations faster. It could even become a little profit center, frankly, for the utility to have their cadre of installers that, could be subcontracted, so to speak, to the ISPs. I mean, Mark said, wow, what a great opportunity that could be. And we've gotten, positive comments from other ISPs as well.
And Deb, if I can jump in for 1 second, I'm just seeing Anne's comment in the chat. Just so you all know, the partners in this program in terms of soliciting for this funding include the 4 primary ISPs in the region. So that would be, again, in terms of building community, it includes LCI, it includes GWI, Pioneer, and Axiom. All 4 we're trying to bring to the table with the Maine Department of Labor. And to my great pleasure, everyone has accepted the invitation so far to come discuss this.
So we're trying to cooperate, and collaborate with everybody. That's what we want to do on those things that we can cooperate and collaborate on, and help our efforts at the same time. So, okay, you guys, moving to action plan. This was not really a discussion. It doesn't need to be a discussion item actually so much, except for when we get down to the marketing, but that's under number 7. But, you can really look at number 5 as being those things that we really need to do. And we've kind of referenced what some of those are. I will talk a little bit about Better Fiber in a minute. But these are all the pieces of the puzzle that we have to deal with. We did mention the Pioneer Broadband Report under feasibility, the fourth bullet, but I would also add Axiom there because it may be Axiom as opposed to Pioneer. So, we'll know more in the next few days where that goes. So number 6 is VetroFiber mapping. I have reported before that we got accepted. We were the first ones to get accepted to the cohort number 2 for VetroFiber. And I'm telling you that VetroFiber is fantastic, but it allows it, well, there's all kinds of stuff that we can put, all kinds of data that we can input in on polls and et cetera, to give us, ISPs use this as well, to give us more exact costing information. But the really fantastic thing that I'm having a lot of fun with right now, and this is how I spend my evenings, I've gotten kind of addicted to it, is that you do this, you can do this auto design feature. And I can literally, draw pictures around your towns, and then I can hit, click, and it tells me approximately how much it is to build your town, approximately how much revenue we would get out of it, approximately how many businesses would be passed versus residences that would be passed. Now it's approximate, it's in the ballpark, but it's really not, it's not that refined, not something that, not as anywhere near as refined as we'd get in a feasibility study. However, what it does do is it gives us the opportunity to do comparisons. So like I can take Rockport, Camden, Thomaston, Rockland, and add Owl's Head, or I can take those first 4 and add Lincolnville, or I could add Searsport, and I can do that comparisons of what that does to the coalition, to the utilities numbers. It also gives you paybacks. And I'll tell you, some of your towns, if you, again, approximate, but some of your towns to go out and build this, as an individual municipality, your payback periods are like 25 to 30 years, whereas somebody else's payback period might be 10 years or 9.5. So it's really quite interesting and informative for just kind of a thumbnail or a ballpark sketch for us. So anyway, VetroFiber, we're going to be working on much more heavily, much closer with them. We have data that we can upload that they'll help us with. We have a 6-month free use of their platform. And we've only had just our first training on it. And there'll be more. So we're quite excited about that too. It's a great resource. And then we go on to the marketing committee, and I'm going to ask John to report on the marketing committee. But one thing that is first bullet point on the marketing committee, I have to say, in all fairness to John, we kind of sprung this on him. And the reason we did is because Matt's been sort of testing out this lobster net. You can see local open broadband access for the entire region. He's been sort of testing it out and just getting feedback from people. And we just wanted to just as a fun sort of street thing, something that people can remember. It obviously doesn't change the name of the true entity, which is Midcoast Internet, but just wanted to get your feedback. So you don't have to give me that feedback now. You could send me a note and tell me, hate it, like it, too coastal centric. Maybe if you're inland a little bit, you think that sends the wrong message. So just send me a note and tell me what you think. But so if we can just go past that, just because of interest of time. John, could you just give us an idea of what you're thinking?
Sure. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just hit the highlights here. I think as much as we all see the value in what we're looking at here, I just want to remind everybody, this is not a build it and they will come sort of product and service. We have some real challenges, both in timing relative to the key dates related to ballot initiatives, federal, state funding deadlines, and of course, no shortage of competition. So, but we've identified 3 major marketing goals or deadlines, if you will. We got the June vote in Rockport and Camden. We're trying to obtain, of course, overall a minimum take rate at least 35% to get commitments or pledges from the community to subscribe to our services, so we can go to funding sources with that kind of a number. I think we can do well over 35%, frankly, but that was some of the early thresholds we've been talking to some of the experts about. We also have the November votes in all the other coalition towns coming up, so we have to be ready to support those with our marketing. Generally, it's it's all trying to drive traffic to the website for both more information and to sign up people for our services. We'll be using multi-platform marketing campaigns, multi-formats. Short term, we're going to rely a lot on social media, digital media, including Josh and Matt's video storytelling. We're going to do some print exposures. We're going to be relying a lot on community networking. So if you have groups, influential groups coming together, whether they might be Rotary clubs, local gatherings, places for bulletin boards to put up our one sheets, we need to know about that. So be thinking about where can we get our information up so that people can, can access it. We're going to be doing earned media, which is non-paid stories in print and digital. And longer term, we'll look at things like direct mail, a more robust print and digital marketing effort, and a lot more public place than the fun stuff in marketing, if you will. But anyway, we're not relying on just volunteers for this. We're looking at a number of vendors, and we're fortunate in the Midcoast that we have two very, very strong local companies that provide both exceptional branding, what I call the sales pitch, and another firm that provides exceptional audience engagement, what I call the close. But we will be looking at every option out there, but we are trying to walk our values as far as supporting our own community as best we can. So that's it. That's I think the top line stuff, unless anybody has questions. I'm grateful for Stephen stepping up to help. Joe's already stepped up. He chatted me already, private chatted me. And who else? Clifford, if you are still here, is he still here? He left.
He's here.
Yeah, I definitely will lean on you for some input on the FAQs and information sheets. So please send me your email so I know how to get a hold of you.
So that's great. So we need people to help John in the marketing effort, as he said. And we also, I'm going to put in a plug for, we are really, I've mentioned this in the past, and now we're really serious about it, that we need people with some financial skills to step forward and to help us on a finance committee. And we've got Steve Matteo from Camden National. We've got some other resources that Stephen Coltai has helped us tap into and everything too. But we, if you know of in your towns or have some financial acumen, then that goes anywhere from, the traditional sort of municipality loans and to the grant writing. And, when we talk about, Melissa is talking about possibly, getting in line for Connect Maine grants, we need somebody to get out there and help us organize that and do the grant writing. That's a big deal. And it's a great idea, Melissa, but somebody's going to have to step forward and help do that. Okay. So just let us know. Stephen.
Can I just ask one question? Did you guys already set up committees besides the Marketing and Communications Committee? Because I'm assuming that the committees, for instance, Finance, which you're talking about right now, could have their own work streams and their own sets of meetings. And so, because there's so much to do, I'm just wondering whether or not you have other committees besides Marketing and Communications.
No, in fact, we talked about that probably at the last meeting, and we identified the committees that we needed, and Finance was, top on there. And I asked people to get back to me, and nobody has gotten back to me. So, but that's exactly what we need. And this call for help is a very serious call for help in that regard. And that's exactly what we hope it to be. And I know that Matt will work with the Finance Committee. And so, yes, they definitely have their own work streams, want them to have their own work streams and go off and do their work.
What are the other ones that you thought of besides Finance and Marketing?
Trying to remember. I'm not so sure that we had another one other than, oh, governance. Denise and I are both lawyers, so it's a natural thing for us to, I mean, frankly, guys, we're saving the coalition a lot of money we drafted the interlocal agreement. Obviously, we did that based on Down East Broadband. We didn't have to create it from nothing, but we definitely made changes to it and all. And I, just to protect myself from, problems, have recently got transferred into a Maine license in Maine. So I'm actually a Maine licensed lawyer. So, anyway, when it comes to the bylaws and all that kind of stuff, that Denise and I can do that. And, like with the interlocal agreement, we obviously with Rockport and Camden, and we would expect other towns to do this. We had our outside counsel, bless it. Both of the outside counsel for those towns did, because that's a town function to enter into the interlocal agreement with us, right? But going forward, when you're talking about bylaws and those things of the corporation, then, and we will also have outside counsel that will help us at the corporation, and just to keep everything, absolutely above board. And I don't mean above board, but just to check all the boxes and everything. We'll have outside counsel, but we'll keep those costs as low as possible by doing our own initial work and then having outside counsel weigh in on it. So governance is another one, but anybody who wants to help us with governance is absolutely welcome to let us know that. And I think those were it, Stephen. I think those were the three. And that's not to say that we haven't thought of one or two. Okay, is there anything that anybody wants to mention before we leave? Sorry to be talking so much. There's so much stuff to convey. And I think one thing that we feel that we need to be better with, we've had a lot of meetings with all these various folks that we have mentioned, and we've gotten so bogged down in meetings that we haven't been as good about communicating the summaries of those meetings to you. And I promise we'll get better, and we will catch up on what we had, missed out on, and we'll be better about that going forward. Yeah, Anne. You're on mute. Anne, you're on mute. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Yesterday's meeting for Northport Broadband Internet Committee, we were approached by Karen Young from Northport, who works with the Maine Broadband Caucus, and she's working with Jan Dodge. And it was the first time I'd even heard of it, so I was curious, especially since Denise in this meeting mentioned that she was aware of it. How long have they been around? Does anybody know? And how would the Midcoast Internet Group be partnering with them, like say on county grants? Could we approach reps at the state level by county to say, we'd like some of that county funding, and could they help us? Does that make sense?
The Maine Broadband Caucus, or as opposed to the coalition? I mean,
it's the
Maine Broadband Coalition?
Yeah, it's sort of a hybrid. I mean, it's where the legislators who are particularly interested in this issue get together.
Right.
And very good work sessions.
Right. So Denise, tell me if I'm incorrect here, but the Maine Broadband Coalition, which has been around for a while, that is, is a good resource and does great stuff. One of the things that they do is they organize the Maine Broadband Caucus, I guess, which is the state legislators who are on the technology, energy, committee, and they record their sessions. And if you have the time, I would urge you to go to the Maine Broadband Coalition, because I think you can get to the caucus from that, or else just Google Maine Broadband Caucus.
Yeah.
And you can see the recordings after the fact. They typically have not had members of the public weigh in or be able to say anything, but they have some pretty interesting stuff. And and for our purposes, we have, you can see, if you look at the first meeting that they had, each legislator talks about their interest and kind of their level of familiarity with fiber and broadband in particular. And that's the place where we've identified some of the legislators that we need to interface with in terms of some of this funding. So the more that we can track that and interface with those legislators in particular, the better. And we have used it for that reason. And I should say that Maine Broadband Coalition, we really have, we had that nice article that Dan Dunkel wrote and from Courier Publications. And that got us a lot of attention. We've had even more towns, contacting us. I mean, we've had Montville and Morrill contacting us, and Waldoboro. So there's a lot of interest that the article generated, but the Maine Broadband Coalition is a good resource, as is the Island Institute. And both of those entities have reached out to us in the past week or two and wanted to get us more involved in their efforts. And Maine Broadband Coalition in particular wants to reach out to exactly what you just said, and they want to reach out to the counties and try to get more coordination going in the counties and bring the counties in when it comes to the funding and the education and all kinds of stuff. And they've asked our coalition to help them in that regard. So we said that we would do that.
Yeah, and it's such a great sort of, we're coming at the counties from the bottom up, but now we can come at them from the top down too.
And there's other groups like Sedgwick. There's other groups like Sedgwick, in the Blue Hill Peninsula. There's a group of 3 towns there that are trying to do what we're doing. We've shared with them our interlocal agreement. We closely network with them. We're helping them. Imagine that we're helping somebody else. We're helping them as much as we can, but they share information with us. So there's really a nice network of towns across the state that are really doing this and sharing information and helping one another.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, you guys, 6:42, I'm sorry we're a little late, but we had a lot of information there, and we'll send you out more information. So I think with that, if somebody wants to make a motion to adjourn.
Last comments?
I think Cliff just did. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, who was that?
Josh Garrison.
Josh, okay, just for purposes of helping Shelley out. Okay, and we're all in favor, I take it?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Deb.
Thanks, everybody.
Jeremy,
Thank you
before
so
you
much.
cut off, Jeremy, before you cancel us, can you just send the link out to the coalition so they can share it with the select board members and broadband committee members who aren't here? Is that okay?
For the YouTube.
The YouTube link?
Oh, it's in the chat, isn't it?
Not the new one. There should be a new one that's gonna be created as soon as you hit stop recording.
Jacob,
Oh, yeah?
could you call me?
All right.
Let's connect, okay? Because I've got.
Matt, I may
something
need you to help me with this as I do this.
related to this. Okay.
Okay. Luckily, I see you tomorrow night, so we can do some boy bonding at that point.
So
All
what
right.
do you do here, Matt?
Right.
Okay, I'm signing off. Thanks, you guys.
Okay, thanks,
Bye.
Deborah.
Oh, copy streaming link?
Thanks, Ben. See ya.
Oh, that should
Matt,
be-
you want me to copy the streaming link?
Yeah, so that'll be good. Once it's ended, it should give you the link and then just copy it over.
I see that. Do I need to stop the live stream first? I do this first.
So did you record the live stream or did you just turn on the live stream?
I turned on the live stream.
Oh, so you did not record it. There's a good chance that it is not recorded.
Well, all our planning board meetings, I've never done that before, Matt.
But they get recorded. Somebody set it up. So it might have an auto.
I think it has an auto record. I think Alan set that up.
Yeah, because that's one of the options. Is that as soon as you start that live stream, that it automatically gets recorded to your channel.
Oh, how about imagine.
You know,
Someone
if
tell
we
me
listen to
stuff.
this, Jeremy, if we're still friends after this whole pandemic thing, there's no stopping. It's gonna be amazing.
There you go. That's awesome.
If we, as long as we make it through the pandemic, we'll see about
Yeah,
that.
and we got to have a burger and a beer, but let's see this. Hold on.
Hopefully you stop because now we're chatting and we're being recorded. If you,
I know.
So we're
Heaven
gonna-
forbid. Let me find the planning board meetings.
right, I'm gonna pause. mute myself so I don't get in trouble.
I know.
John, are you okay over there? And Brian? Yeah, hello, John Gibbons. You're muted with a beautiful lighthouse. Hello,
Yep,
John.
I'm okay.
Okay, just checking. And Brian Doyle, are you still with us, or is it just?
I'm about to leave. See ya.
Good, John. Have a good evening, and thank you, sir.
Our planning board meetings are on the website. If I go to the town of Camden, I've got planning board meetings there.
Okay.
So it must be automatically doing that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, see, because right
So
now.
should I copy the streaming link?
Yeah, I mean, because right now, when I hit record, it would say, it's saying, please ask host to give you permission to record. So the Zoom may, again, I don't know how Allison set it up. You do have the option of having things automatically recorded. I hope that's the way it is. Otherwise, just next time, we'll just hit the record button.
Well, yeah, it needs to be that way. So.
All right, no, I hear you.
All right, so I sent it to my clipboard.
Yeah, let's see what happens.
All right, so I'm